Session 1 of the LM conference. This is room C if you've got your programme, and I'm very pleased to welcome Scott Bradley and Valentina Flex, who are going to talk to us about challenging legacies. So there's going to be the paper and then time for questions afterwards. Thank you.
I'm going to start my timer so I don't run over. Hello, my name is Valentina Flex, and this is my colleague Scott Bradley, and we're going to tell you a little bit about our work with the Gertrude Bell Archive at Newcastle University Special Collections. So I will just start assuming that you don't know anything about her, and apologies if you do. So we have the Gertrude Bell Archive at Newcastle University Special Collections. Gertrude Bell was born in Washington in County Durham in 1868, so she was somewhat local to the northeast. She was an archaeologist, a traveller, a writer. She travelled extensively, particularly around the Middle East, but also around North America, East Asia and Europe. She then later became a member of British intelligence, so she was recruited to join the Arab Bureau in Cairo initially, and then she moved to Basra and then Baghdad in Iraq. She was heavily involved in the creation of the Kingdom of Iraq, so after the war she stayed in Baghdad and oversaw and was involved in the formation of the government, the coronation of the first king, and eventually the drawing of the borders of the country. After all of that was done, she founded the Iraq Museum, and she returned to archaeology, and she also created the first antiquities law for the country, and she died in Baghdad in 1926. So the archive contains over 12,000 unique records, photographs, letters, diaries. We also have negatives, we have prints, we have the photograph albums as well, and we have reports and memoranda, as well as some pieces of writing that she did, like some fiction, a tiny bit of fiction, mainly non-fiction. The archive spans 52 years, so more or less her whole life, excluding when she couldn't really write. Even then, we have some lovely letters that were written by her nanny and then signed in her childlike hand at the end. The archive documents Bell's activities, so her personal activities, but also her political work, her archaeological work, and it documents her travels pretty extensively. And it portrays a lot of landscapes and people, many of which, groups of people and archaeological sites and places, have been significantly changed or destroyed throughout the years. So as a result of how unique and valuable this resource is, UNESCO inscribed it on their Memory of the World Register in 2017. It's highly used locally and internationally. I'd say over half of our inquiries annually relate to this archive. People are constantly using it and there's always a lot of interest in it. And it's complemented by the Bell collection of her books, so that's her personal and working library, which was donated around the same time by her family. So the project that I was originally employed under was the Gertrude Bell and the Kingdom of Iraq at 100 project, which was funded by the Harry and Alice Stillman Family Foundation in the States. It was centred around improving accessibility and preservation of the archive. So we are incredibly aware of not only how important the archive is in terms of tangible heritage, but also intangible heritage, and the fact that a lot of the history within the archive belongs to people internationally. It just lives with us, but it belongs to everyone around the world. So the project focused on digitisation, done by my colleague Graham, cataloguing done by myself, the creation of a new website, which Scott will talk about in a minute, as well as the creation of an exhibition. So my colleague Graham digitised over 13,000 items, letters, diaries, photographs, and I said before, negatives, prints and albums, and also arranged for these to be housed properly, so in acid-free folders and boxes, so you can see a conservator working on them up here, and they're now all beautifully stored in a freezer in one of our stores, which you can see here. And my part of this was the cataloguing, so I was improving the descriptions and creating ISAG compliant metadata for the archive, as well as adding locations for the material and improving the dates, because a lot of the dates attributed to the items weren't quite correct, so that was quite fun detective work for me. This is just a little example of how wonderful the digitisation work was that we had done. So we had a website before, which was really good for what it was, but it was made a long time ago. It was a bit clunky and the digitisation was quite out of date. So here you can see on the left-hand side, the old version, and then on the right, the new one. So there's just so much more nuance in the image. And also, interestingly, I had a student looking at this, and he was trying to locate where that was, like where the image was taken. And he was originally looking at the old scan, and he was like, oh, I just have no idea where this is. And I said, well, have a look at the new one and see if that helps. And he was able to identify it using the mountain range behind her, which before, like of all the old scans that we had, these kinds of details just weren't visible. Equally, we now have the entire photograph albums available online on our website. So prior to this, we had the individual images, which was still an amazing resource, but now we can give people access, the closest possible access, short of coming to the archive and handling the albums, to looking at the material. So you can see we have the front and the back pages, so every single page in each album, as well as all Belle's captions and the way that she has curated them in the album, as opposed to just presenting them in isolation from each other. So these are some of the things that we were doing, and then we turned to Scott to help us create a website that could really maximise the impact of all this work. So I'll hand over to you. Oh, you don't need this because you've got Britney Spears.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, so one thing when we thought we'd redo this website, one of the things we wanted to incorporate was something new, a fairly new technology called IIIF, which, can I just get a show of hands before I go any further? Has anyone heard of IIIF, used IIIF? Couple of hands, perfect, thank you. Well, for those that aren't, I'll quickly take you through sort of what IIIF is and how it works, and then go into sort of how we've used it. So IIIF stands for the International Image Interoperability Framework, which is a bit of a tongue twister. And it's a framework that's been used to sort of standardise how images are presented and served online. IIIF is a way of sort of standardising the delivery of images, and more recently sort of audio-visual files from servers to different environments on the web, where they can be viewed and sort of interacted with in different ways. As we all know, modern web browsers understand how to display formats like JPEGs and MP4s, etc., to find sizes, but they can't really do much else, So the IIIF specifications, excuse me, align with general web standards, and it defines how all browsers work to enable sort of richer functionality beyond just viewing a static image or an audio-visual file. So for images, what I mean by that is sort of deep zoom, comparisons, sort of side-by-side, and even structures. By structures, I mean, so for example, for the Gertrude Bell books, that is sort of page order, so you can sort of flick from one page to another, and even annotation. And then for the audio-visual materials, that means sort of being able to deliver complex structures, such as sort of film reels, and bring them together and make a single movie, along with things like captions and transcriptions, translations, annotations, and much more. And IIIF makes all these objects work in a sort of consistent way across different environments. IIIF objects are viewed inside what we call a IIIF viewer. The viewer takes a file called a manifest, which is just a JSON file. You don't necessarily need to know JSON to sort of understand or work with IIIF. The viewer interprets that manifest and then sort of spits out the image with accompanying metadata. The viewer then can be embedded on websites or within applications and styled and themed accordingly. This image here is just the default view from a Mirador viewer, it's called. But with viewers like this and others, you can add plugins, etc., which adjust the way they behave and the features that are available. And all of this gives us the ability to connect and sort of unite materials across institutional boundaries and more. IIIF, so the first I in IIIF, like I said, it stands for international. International is implemented sort of internationally across the world. I've just come back from a IIIF conference I was hosting out in Los Angeles a week or two ago, and we had representatives from all over the globe, from the Far East to North and South America, Europe, Middle East, etc. There was a lot of people there. And there's even some universities and museums in the Northeast already using IIIF, like what we've just come past, the York Railway Museum use it, Durham University I think heavily use it, and even here at Leeds University use it. And the next IIIF annual conference is actually going to be hosted here in Leeds at Leeds University. And the next I in IIIF is for image. However, slightly misleading that, because like I said earlier, it also includes our audio-visual, but I think when audio-visual was introduced, they'd always sort of come up with this IIIF acronym. IIIF started with the problem of making large images available on the web. This means, like I said earlier, allowing users to zoom into large images in a way that's sort of scalable and allows for quick zooming. And I suppose in a similar way to how Google Maps works, it doesn't load sort of, with Google Maps, it doesn't load the whole world immediately. It just loads the sections or the tiles that you zoom into, the bits that you're interested in. And IIIF enabled images work in a similar way, only loading the areas that you're interested in, sort of ultimately reducing bandwidth and making sort of a better user experience. And one example of it is, and this, if you've used IIIF, you'll have seen this example no doubt before, is with this Japanese tax map, which you can see here. And this is a guy called Wayne, who I'm led to believe is the lead photographer at Stanford University. Sort of to give it scale, I think Wayne is about 6'4" tall, so you can see the size of that map. And, the map is so big that it'll be photographed in sort of separate sections and then stitched together using Photoshop. It's sort of gigapixels big. And I'm going to hope if I can show you what I mean. Yeah, where's my cursor? Yeah, so like I said, this is probably 12 foot tall, this image, but what you can do is, and it's probably, mega, if not gigabytes big, the image, but using IIIF, you can sort of load it instantly, you're not taking loads of bandwidth up, and then zoom into the finer detail, and scroll around, etc. Sorry, this worked in practice. That one there. Yeah. And the fine line, IIIF is for interoperability, meaning because IIIF provides a sort of standard way of exposing images and metadata, it's possible to switch between viewers to view the same content in sort of different web pages or in applications. So for example, users might want to do this for a number of reasons. The library provides, for example, a IIIF manifest in a sort of general purpose viewer, one called Universal Viewer. Another user might take that manifest and annotate it in another viewer, like Mirador. And then a third user might come along and run some sort of AI language tools using another viewer called Curation IIIF Image Viewer, and so on. So as you can see from sort of one manifest, the image can be taken and used in a lot of different ways by a lot of different people. And here's another great example of sort of interoperability within IIIF. This is a damaged manuscript. 12 images were cut out at some point, I don't think anyone knows when, and ended up at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France in the 19th century. Both the manuscript and images were brought back together using the power of IIIF. And again, I'll try and show you what I mean by that. Yeah, okay. So this background image we're looking at here is hosted and owned by one institution. And then the images that were cut out at an earlier date are owned by another institution. And using IIIF, they've been brought back together, something that would probably never happen if they were, just remained as physical items. And again, we can even disable the background image. You can then just, for example, zoom in on the image that had been removed in the past, and vice versa as well. Okay, so IIIF at Newcastle. We started using IIIF around 2017 when we launched our then new digital asset management system, Content-DM. Content-DM generates the required IIIF manifest for us, and then it consumes it in different applications. Since then, we've gone out and developed a lot of different IIIF components that can be used across a host of library applications, sort of from websites to kiosks, etc. And if anyone wondered, this is what the IIIF manifest looks like, just a lot of JSON, but like I said earlier, you don't necessarily need to be up with JSON to sort of use and consume IIIF manifest. We generally use a customized Mirador viewer in the applications we develop, just because we find it has all the features that we want, and it's relatively easy to customize. We actually use a stripped down version of Mirador in some of our library web pages in our archival catalogue pattern. And we find having a viewer on these pages allows users to experience some of the collections in a way that hasn't been possible before. Again, we use a customized Mirador viewer on our kiosk in our exhibition space within the library. It allows for a sort of more immersive experience we find for our exhibition visitors. And we find it works well when we have it alongside printed material, because it allows visitors to see the physical item. A lot of the time that would be in a secure display cabinet. But with this, then they can sort of flick through and zoom into the sort of areas of interest. This was one of our previous exhibitions, Newcastle University at 60, showing pictures over the years, once again using Mirador and IIIF. And like I mentioned earlier, one of the things we like about Mirador is the ability to customise the interface relatively quickly and effectively. You can see here, for example, we've gone for a black background in kiosk mode with the thumbnails along the bottom of the screen, but Mirador allows you to sort of move those buttons around, and you can even lay them out in sort of a gallery for even easier navigation. We also work closely with the Museum of Newcastle, the Great North Museum. Last year the museum hosted a Bell exhibition, once again, using IIIF to display some of the Bell's photograph albums. The pic doesn't show it here, but that picture on the left, there was, again, a physical display cabinet next to it with the album in, and again, it allowed users to sort of flick through that album. However, we don't just keep IIIF work to ourselves. Exeter University had a Gertrude Bell exhibition running earlier this year. And there it is again on the kiosk. And another exhibition which my colleague Valentina has just returned from at the Iraq Britain Business Council in London. Both exhibitions, and again we took the kiosk down with the Gertrude Bell stuff on, and both exhibitions used the kiosk to display IIIF content from the Bell archive. We've also used IIIF for an application we're turning our branding as page turners. It allows access to some of the standout collections within our collections. It once again allows that rich immersive experience, and that was never possible in the past. As you can see, you can sort of zoom right into some of. This isn't the Bell archive, it's Trevella and the family archive, but as you can see, you can zoom right in and get find the details. And then moving on to what Valentina was talking about earlier, the new Gertrude Bell website. This was the old one that Valentina mentioned. So as you can sort of see here, it was a bit, looked old, a bit flaky. It required a lot of updating, from the basic search to where the image and the metadata was presented. And then this is the new search, a new site on the search results page. It employs sort of Apache Solr as a search engine, and it uses facets down the left-hand side that help you find items that you want quicker. When planning the new website, though, like I said earlier, we knew we needed to incorporate IIIF because, like Valentina touched on, it allows for that enhanced accessibility. IIIF allows users now to sort of interact with the material in the way interact with the Bell material in a way that they haven't before, and it's especially true for Bell's diaries and letters. For example, here, where you can sort of zoom right into the notes that Bell has scribbled in the margins. One of my favourites from the collection is where Bell has used tape to stick pressed flowers in. And I think, IIIF really brings those sort of details to life. Zooming into these editions makes it for a much more rich and immersive experience. And you can also see here, denoted by the IIIF logo, sort of where it says transcription, it gives anyone the ability to sort of grab that JSON file, that manifest, and then, as I said earlier, use it in a way that they want. Another great example of IIIF is this Japanese drawing of one of Bell's diary entries. You can really see the detail in the gold and the red threads, and even the pin that sort of started ironed there as well, zoom right in. And one last favourite of mine is Bell's dance cards from the royal ship Para, I think I'm pronouncing that right, on her way to the Caribbean dated 1898. Zooming in, even into full screen, it really brings the details, to life on that. Which again, if it was just a static JPEG, probably it would be very hard to do unless you had a massive sort of file. And what IIIF also allows you to do is sort of resize IIIF generated images on the fly. So instead of having to use either something like Adobe Photoshop or CSS to achieve it, you can pass image coordinates in the IIIF URL, and it'll return a resized or cropped image, which you can see here. Yeah. And this white bit. This is the URL that's been used to generate. The highlighted bit is the coordinates of that image. And colleagues, using that previous example, colleagues sometimes find it a little difficult to find the exact coordinates of an image, so we create a small app that returns coordinates for them. You just need to enter the original image URL and then drag the box to generate the new image URL, including the coordinates, which once again you can see here in the yellow. Because of this feature, 99% of the images because of IIIF, 99% of the images on the Bell's website are IIF generated images mean you only store a few locally, so reducing duplication and ultimately space on the server, which our IT department is over the moon about. And now Valentine will briefly cover the next phases of the Bell project.
So I'll just very quickly... Is this... Oh! Very quickly tell you about the things that we're now doing and that we're going on to do with the Bell Archive using IIIF and our website. So we have nearly finished a project called Evolving Hands, which uses handwritten text recognition and text encoded initiative to transcribe letters written in Bell's hand, and then to add contextual notes and other information onto that transcription. This was a methodological sort of exploration of how we as cultural heritage professionals, and not like tech professionals, could potentially use this technology to enhance our collections. But I was involved in the project to kind of help with the content side and writing the contextual notes and stuff. So although the point of this was to kind of develop a methodology and reflect on that, I found it really exciting because there's a lot of things, particularly in the Bell Archive, where if you view some letters in isolation, you might not really understand what she's talking about because it's quite complicated. There's a lot of names that you might not know. I certainly didn't know when I first started working with the archive. So the possibilities of giving egalitarian access to things using this was really exciting for me. And the current project that I'm working on is called Beyond the Margins, and we are creating a geospatial interface that was going to be embedded into the website. So there's a little picture of the development site at the moment, and as you can maybe see, as quite small on there, we are going to be tagging all of the over 12,000 items on the site with coordinates as far as possible, like to be as accurate as we can. And when we can't be accurate, well, when we can't pinpoint it exactly, we'll use polygons or regions to give an idea of where she was on a map. Then when you click onto a pin, it will open, usually there will be multiple photos, for example, in one location. So we'll open a little list. When you click on the item, it will pull the image through from the website using IIIF and present it in a little viewer. And what I didn't realise until recently, which is really cool, is that because it's showing you it within Mirador, within like a little mini viewer, you can actually play around with the contrast and the brightness and things, and you can kind of, manipulate the image if you would like to, which I think is really lovely, particularly if perhaps it's not being developed as well by Bell or whoever was developing them. Some of them might be a bit like lighter in colour, so you can also do that. And we're also going to incorporate timeline narratives into the site, so we will have the map, but then we will also have almost like a little mini exhibition feature at the bottom where students or researchers can gain access to the back end, pick a number of items and then explain the relevance between, like the links between them or the relevance of them in telling a story or exploring a theme. And then when you click along to each section in that narrative, it will zoom to the next item and then show you like a line between them so you can see the physical connection. So that's like a big job, but that's what we're currently working on, and we hope that that will launch in kind of October, November time. But we are incredibly lucky to have this amazing resource in terms of the archive, but also in terms of the website and all the work that's been done so far. And yeah, we hope to continue playing around with this in the future and seeing what comes out of it. So that's the end. We'd be happy to take questions if anyone has any. Thank you.